Step 4, the body. The body has so much information. So you have to be looking. You've done all of your research at this point. You know what your goal is. You know what your purpose is. But how do you make sense of this? Well, we begin by organizing. So we don't just sit with paper and pen and just let your hand go. What you want to do is you begin by organizing it. Would you ever live in a house that doesn't have a blueprint, that wasn't built using a blueprint? Well, I would hope not. And in the same way, you should never deliver a speech to an audience that doesn't have a blueprint. So your body must have what I call a skeleton outline. Now let's talk about organization for a second. In order to outline it, you've got to organize the thoughts, the content, the information that you're going to be sharing in the speech. So I've thought a lot about organization, but when I've thought about it, at the end of the day, there's really only 3 things that you could do with organization, okay? The process of organizing something begins by naming, okay? So if I take everything in a room and I throw it in a big heap, it makes no sense. You can't even see what those things are until you take perhaps a chair, and you take the chair out and you say, okay, this is a chair, and I'm going to that goes in furniture, okay? So you begin by naming, but you could just throw a name, and a lot of people just will throw a name. This is called name. A topic is essentially the same word for naming something. Classification, category. This is all the same word for literally putting a name on an idea or something that, an idea or a concept. But there's other ways that you could organize too. And I think a lot of people forget to consider these other organizational strategies that are just at your fingertips. So the next thing you could do to organize is you could put it in some form of order. So we have, when we think about order, we have chronology, chronological order, or alphabetical order. There are so many different ways that you can put it in rank, maybe a general, or think about our legislative office. You've got the White House, you've got the judicial, maybe a spatial, head and shoulders, knees and toes. You have, there's 3 reasons why you want to organize something, the top, or maybe a David Letterman's top 10. So these are all ways to organize using order, and they're organizational strategies that you could use. Now, we also can compare or analyze the information. So when we do this, we have strategies like problem solution, the good, the bad, the ugly. What a beautiful strategy to use to organize a speech. And the audience will remember the points of your speech. Think about this. If you finish your speech and you ask someone, hey, so, what did I talk about? And they can't tell you the points of the speech, did they get the message? Really not. Maybe they remember a highlight of a story or something, but that wasn't what the speech was about. So your body must have a clear organizational strategy to help them. We can use strengths and weaknesses, the features and the benefits. There's so many different strategies. We have a whole list, if you look at the organizational matrix on your right-hand side, that can show you all of the strategies. Now, some of these strategies are more informative. Some of them are more persuasive. So you need to, as you go through this, think that and select. I say don't even select just one. When you first begin, I always select 3 strategies that I could use for that speech, that could reach my purpose. But then at the end of the day, I'm going to narrow it down after I look at the first 3 strategies, and then I will narrow it down to the best one that can reach my purpose so that I can reach the goal of my speech. A Roman numeral 1, which is our main point. You have a subpoint. 1 is your research, and 2 is an example. So that research and the example make your subpoint. Those 2 things make that happen. Let's say, for instance, that we're doing a speech on listening. You could look at the sample listening speech that's in Speech Sage. I'm going to use that for demonstration purposes here. The organizational strategy that I chose to use for a speech on listening, and my purpose statement was, by the end of my speech, my audience will listen competently. So the organizational strategy that I chose to use was, what is listening and how can we listen better? What this is called is a structure functionality. So the structure of something, what is it? And functionality, how do we use it? So we're going to use structure function. What is listening? How can we become better listeners? In the listening speech, based on my research, if we're asking what listening is, we must go to definition. Begin by defining it. So my first subpoint is definition. And then based on the research we also had myths that we came up with. So we put myths up there. And then our C was just some basic facts about listening. So based on these three things, I have my Roman numeral 1, my A, my B, and you don't always have to have a C. It depends upon the length of the speech or how much time you can put into it. But here we used a C. Now, if you can see, your subpoint, so the subpoint is essentially just a name. Now your research drives the speech. This is the reason, this is the jewels, this is the present that you're offering to the people. The research is why you're there sharing the information. So you want to make sure that you include that information, and so your research is there. And then sometimes that research though can be some highly technical information. So what you want to do is you want to break it down. And how we do that is we seek to connect with our audience. So we give a personal example, a connection with our audience to break that down. When we use personal connection, we are going to get personal and remember those details that we talked about earlier. You want to say who, what, where, why, when, how, not, oh, I remember when I was a child, I didn't listen to my mother. You'd want to give a specific scenario when you didn't listen. Okay? I'd like to talk to you a little bit more about your research. Your research should be, it's got to be credible. You have to provide quality research if you're in front of a group of people talking about it. You want to think, who wrote it? Why should we listen? Is it peer reviewed? And always share your journey aloud with your audience and explain to them who wrote it. So when you're researching it, you want to ask these hard questions, but you're also going to share it with your audience when you deliver your speech. You always have to explain where and when it was published, and this adds to your credibility. And unless you are the expert, you've got to offer some substance from someone who is the expert. Don't get up there and say, well, the expert said this, but I don't agree with them. If you're including it in your speech, then your job is not really to just break it down unless you're doing an intentional debate. But don't override years of research and industry knowledge because you know how to listen better or something. You should go to the experts who do know how to do that and who have done qualified research that's peer reviewed. Let us now talk a little bit more about connections. Your connections are crucial. You could have all your research, but if you fail to make it come home, that information makes sense to your audience, you're going to fail to get the message through to them. What we do is we have these moments of connectivity with your audience. And I say that your connection is essentially an example of some sort, and there's three different types. We have a personal example. This is a story that you have experienced that's coming from within you. We use our personal examples to reveal who we are to our audience. You want to, what I call, show a little leg. You've got to reveal who are you. Otherwise, somebody else can do the exact same speech, and there's no personality to it whatsoever. Next, we have a probe. Now, a probe is extremely powerful. We are selfish people by nature. Have you ever noticed that? We care first for our own good. And this is how it should be. In fact, I always try to say that if there is someone who cares more about you, either you're ridiculously immature, a child, or acting like a child, or they're a stalker. So we are selfish people, and you have to remember that when you have an audience of people who are sitting out there dealing with all of the stuff that's in their brain. Can they pay rent? Is their child sick? Whatever it may be, the stress and the complexities that are the challenges that they're facing. When you deliver a speech, it's like a tightrope. You are trying to get them out of their internal noise, willing to listen to you first and foremost. So you need to connect with them. And one of the ways that we can connect is by probing. And so what you do is you get them to personally connect and to conjure up their own experience rather than hearing your experience, to conjure up their own experience, how they can relate to what it is that you're speaking about. If I were to use the listening speech as an example, this is how I'd use it to probe with my audience. Think with me. Think of all the people that are represented in your life. Now, out of them, who is the best listener that you know? Can you envision them? Who is the worst listener you know? How good of a listener are you? So this is an example of probing your audience. Here I'm trying to get them to think about listening and how it's affected their life so that they in turn want to listen to what I have to say more. So when you have a list of information, rather than reading each piece of information, perhaps you can show them the list, allow them to digest the information, and then ask them, hey, so which of these myths resonates with you most? And then get them to share that experience if the format allows you to. And then in that way, they're making sense of the information in their own mind. The last way that we can connect with our audience is through a literal example. Now, a literal example is you can show a picture. I've had a student one time give a speech where he said that he knew about success because he had lost 200 pounds. Well, in that instance, he didn't share a picture, and my goodness, this is a situation where a picture is worth 1,000 words. If he had showed that picture and said, that was me a year and a half ago, holy cow, the audience, they would have just been, their jaws would have hit the ground. So those are the 3 ways that we connect, that we create connections with our audience. We give personal, we do a probe, or a literal. So you want to use these throughout, embed them throughout your speech, and make sure that they are the best way for that particular segment that you can connect with best with your audience.